Hi, my name is Bill Muniz. I'm the acting warden at Salinas Valley State Prison, and I'd like to discuss a topic with you today, but before I do, I have a request, and I would ask that you make an assessment really quickly of how you feel. And the reason why I ask that is I'd like for you to pay attention as I introduce the topic today so that you get an idea of how you are reacting to that topic. Okay, so today's topic, rehabilitation. In July 1st of 2005, California Department of Corrections added the words "and" rehabilitation into our name, and from then on we've been known as the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The reaction to that varied, but I'd like to share a story that I learned when I was a young boy. Details are a little fuzzy, but the point is crystal clear. World War II, there was a United States naval vessel that was floating out in the ocean. They were given some really high level, top secret instructions on a mission. The ship began to change directions, so the sailors on board immediately noticed, where are we going and what are we doing? And as we began to ask that question to the people who might otherwise provide the answer, it was clear to them that by not getting an answer, that it was in fact top secret. So 2 or 3 days into their sailing, they noticed another United States vessel. And so as not to be too obvious, they flashed over to that vessel, where are we? So the second vessel flashed back, where are you going? So the first vessel answered honestly, we don't know. So the second vessel actually gave this answer, and it's kind of the poignant point I would like to make here. They said, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter where you are. So we put the push pin of rehabilitation in the department July 1st, 2005, and said that's actually where we're going, so that we know based on that push pin, we can measure from the push pin standpoint where we are versus where we're going to make sure that we're on track. So I did mention that the reaction to rehabilitation varies. So let's kind of examine my lens. My history, I started in the department as a correctional officer, promoted as a sergeant, and then to lieutenant, then a captain, then associate warden, chief deputy warden, now as acting warden. So my lens, probably specific to custody. So let's examine the custody world. And since I don't have any visual aids here, you'll have to kind of follow with me. And I'm going to say that this is the world of custody, and I'm going to identify it overly so. I'm going to overly generalize it as survival in the interest of time. And I'm going to say that rehabilitation, I'm going to overgeneralize as a category, and I'm going to label this innovation and creativity. So let's examine for a second the custody response, and I'm going to go into a stress response. And the stress response essentially is this. It kind of looks like this. Imagine, for example, a zebra in the wild. It's grazing, it's eating, and it hears a rustling in the reeds, and it says to itself in this stress response survival mode. And so all of the other zebras around hear this, and they also have the same response. This is a good system. This is a really good system for the survival of this herd. And as I look to where the noise is coming from, if it's not a lion that can kill and eat them, they actually can take a deep breath and go back to what they were doing before. But in that moment of stress, this is what's happening inside of the body. The stress response is simply like this: an increase in heart rate, adrenaline, increase in breathing. Glucose is now redistributed to the muscles. What happens essentially is non-essential functions of the body for the moment cease. Actually, in this moment, you can't grow your fingernails. Your body's ability to fight off infectious disease drops. These are kind of important and essential functions of the body, but not, quite frankly, at the point of survival. So in this mode of survival, all available resources are reallocated for the body's survival. And this actually is what happens inside of an institution. Correctional officers respond to an alarm. That's the moment. And sometimes it goes all the way up from code 1 to code 3, and we respond to the emergency and the stress response. And at the institutional level, what happens is when there's education out, we shut down education, we return inmates. We have the yard out, we shut that down, we send back the inmates. During a code 3, we send back education, we send back religious services, inmate leisure time activity groups, self-help groups. We send back everybody in the interest of the survival of the moment. And I would argue that these are essential functions, but not when you're trying to stay alive. Now, that's the survival world of correctional officers, and admittedly, it's probably just a little overstated. But when you move into the realm of creativity and innovation, these are the people who actually do rehabilitation, and I call it the magic of the institution. When magic occurs inside of an institution, it's usually going to be in the realm of creativity and innovation, and the people whose focus and sole purpose is rehabilitative type programs. Magic, I know, sounds like a strange word for prison. I get that. But I have to give you an example. At Salinas Valley State Prison, we had a group that was working on anger management, and they were doing a program called Alternatives to Violence. So in this group, mostly lifers, mostly inmates that have not been able to get off the 180 yards, probably have murders, they're probably gang members, and they're in this group, and intensely they're talking about how to get to alternatives to violence, and not surprisingly got a little intense. And so the facilitator asked the inmates, let's just take a break for a second, let's do something that sort of changes our state of being. And so he asked them to play the hokey pokey. Lifer inmates, murderers, guys that are gang members, probably they were not really thrilled about the notion of the hokey pokey, but he was able to convince them to play along, and they played a friendly round of the hokey pokey. They all laughed and joked, and it did, in fact, change their state of being, and they went back into doing what they had been doing, which was get back into their program and their project. And I would submit to you that magic happened in this world of rehabilitation and in this world of creativity and innovation, and it could not have happened inside the building, the housing unit, or the yard, or a cell, or a gym, because the idea, overly stated, that shows some weakness. Doing the hokey pokey just doesn't look all that tough. And moments of weakness are difficult for inmates in their world of survival. They also are in a world of survival. One of the lifer inmates from that yard, who is a very respected inmate at our prison but hasn't managed to get off of a level 4 yard yet, said that when he goes into his lifer group, and I loved his imagery, he kind of did this thing with his hand as if his hand was a mask, and he was holding the rubber band of a mask he would get at the store. And he said when he got into the group, he could take off his mask just for a moment and be the person who he really is, and not the person that he has to represent on the yard. But before the group is done, before the magic is over, he's got to get that mask and put it back on and walk back out there to the yard. That was his viewpoint of what was going on. And that's why I say in these groups, more magic happens. In the custody realm and the survival realm of the housing unit, certainly that could be possible, but is less likely. So having understood that inmates in the housing unit are going to be less who they really are, I've asked the staff at our prison during our off-post training, are you more who you really are when you're at home, or are you more who you really are when you're at work? And the staff raised their hand, and 99% of them have said, in fact, I'm more who I am at home than who I am at work. And my compelling question to them is, then why would you expect inmates who actually live here to be any different? Now, the inmates do have opportunities to get a little more comfortable in that environment, but make no mistake about it, it remains, unfortunately, the world of survival. And so between these two disciplines, the balance of custody and survival and the realms of rehabilitative programs of innovation and creativity, the balance between the two has to happen, because the prison still has to be safe, and we still have to be able to reach out. So here at my point, from Salinas Valley State Prison, we've had more lockdowns, modified programs, PSRs, whatever you want to call them, than the average prison. And in that mode, and I've asked our staff, do you like lockdown? And some of them have said yes. And when I asked them why they liked the lockdown, they said, it's safer. So the compelling question I have is, for whom? And the answer is, even though sometimes they can't answer it, for us. It's safer for us. But let me illustrate something really briefly. The correctional officer has a stab-resistant vest. He carries an ad-knock expandable baton, and he has OC pepper spray, and he has an alarm box. And when he hits that alarm box, he can summon a response really quickly, certainly faster than, I don't know, my family in the community can summon response. And then he has a partner, and there is a gunner, and there's an alarm response protocol that can basically shut down a whole prison and reallocate staff in merely seconds and moments to help that officer out. And the compelling notion is this: my family does not have the blessing of a stab-resistant vest, an ad-knock expandable baton, OC pepper spray, a partner, a gunner, and an alarm response protocol. And if the magic of rehabilitation happens across the yard in the areas where religious services, education, inmate leisure time activity groups, self-help, and vocations, if this is where the magic is happening, then we as custody staff have to take the step to release the inmate from this lock and feed mentality of putting the food in a food port and locking it so that we can just get the bare bones minimum done and then be safe. We have to encounter the potential for danger, open up that cell door, walk the inmate across the yard from the realms of overstated survival and into the realms of potential rehabilitation where the magic happens, and that's where something can happen. And I like to give this example. I do this in my off-post training. I pull out a simulated phone, or sometimes I just get out my phone, and I pretend that I'm calling my wife who works locally, and I call her and I say, "Hey babe, yeah, we're releasing an inmate. He's coming to our town." No, he's not safe at all. No, absolutely not. We just kind of put his food in the food port and we close it and, out for programs? Oh, no, he's too dangerous. He might assault somebody, he might assault us. So we don't let him out of his cell. No, way too dangerous. Anyway, he's paroling to our city. I just wanted to let you know, lock the back door and don't pick up any hitchhikers. That story, when I tell staff, it immediately makes a lot of sense. A lot of times we think of rehabilitation and we're mired in the thought of what might happen, because if we let them out of their cells, then something bad could happen that certainly would minimize the potential for danger. Well, I'm not talking about minimizing potential for danger in an unsafe way. I'm talking about doing it in a safe way and allowing the inmates to get from this place. Statistics tell us that the average person has 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day, and 90% of them are the same thoughts you had yesterday. And the only way to have a new thought is to get into a new realm, allow education and vocation and all those other programs that are rehabilitative in nature to give an inmate to think differently. It's called a synaptic connection. I'm not going to go into the details of that. And when the inmate gets into this environment, a different thought process can emerge, and then rehabilitation is possible. And at the end of the day, if an inmate doesn't achieve rehabilitation, because it's not passed out at the door, it's not received, it's actually achieved. If he doesn't achieve rehabilitation at the end of the day, we know that we've done our job by allowing the programs to work the way they're supposed to. Custody takes care of security, and all of our other staff who do the magic do the rehabilitation. I challenge you to embrace and accept that notion, because your family and our loved ones are depending on it. Thank you.